Thank you. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. From Sydney. Um, I am Sylvester. I am happy for this opportunity to have this conversation in relation to spirituality, culture, technology, and healthcare use. Um, Let me start by acknowledging that I am joining this meeting today from the unceded land of the Darug people, the indigenous custodians of the land where I live, work, and play. And then to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that respects to every indigenous peoples across Australia and all over the world. And then to understand, to affirm that the health and rights and development of indigenous peoples are very, very important in global health, in international health, and in population health. I am a diasporic Nigerian, as Becky rightly mentioned. I was born and raised in Nigeria. I migrated to Australia. How time flies. It's going to be 7 years in 9 days. August 1. I came to Australia August 1st, 2018 to pursue a PhD. And I love the country. So I decided to stay back. After graduating 3 years ago, 2022, 2+ years ago, um, my work today is based on my lived experience as someone who was socialized in a setting where spirituality is very common, where actions, including healthcare related actions, are viewed and judged by a belief system. And then also in my line of transparency and reflexivity, I speak English with a heavy, heavy Nigerian accent. So I am sorry. Should I be sorry? Okay, let me be sorry. I am sorry if I say anything that is not clear. I do not intend to. And I am not embarrassed when anyone says, "Can you clarify?" I teach at the university, and in all of my classes, I always say this in every class, even if I said it before. I speak English with a heavy Nigerian accent. It is perfectly fine if anyone asks me to repeat. I will try to speak as slowly, as clearly as possible. And I also know that no matter how clearly and slowly I speak, I might still say something that's not clear. So please, if I do, no, when I do, not if I do, when I do, please ask me to repeat. I'm not embarrassed. If I cannot say it in a way that you will understand, I can type it into the chat. Luckily, I only speak English with accent. I don't write English with accent. So I'll share my screen if that's okay. I've got just a slide that I want to use to guide my talk because I'm a storyteller. I don't want to drift. The slide will keep me on point, and I want this to be a very, very organic interaction. It is something that resonates in my heart as a Bible preacher. Let me clarify so we know where I'm coming from. I'm a Bible teacher, a Bible preacher. I'm a Christian. Um, I'm also a researcher. And then I do a lot of research with communities, especially migrant communities in Australia. And then I understand the intersection of spirituality, cultural belief, and healthcare use, both as a researcher and someone with lived experience. So it is insight from all these that I want us to interact and reflect upon because of some things that we can see in the media of how people have compromised their health because of a belief system. And then we've read stories in the media of parents and religious leaders that have been jailed for attempted murder because some people's care was compromised on the basis of spirituality and religion. So these are the factors that are driving this conversation, and I would really love for us to have a very, very interesting, engaging, organic conversation. I am not a psychiatrist. I am not a psychologist. I'm not a mental health expert. I am just a researcher and someone with lived experience. I am speaking in the confidence that I've got some experts in that field. Thank God Becky is here. Dr. Atsu is here too. To watch my back in case I have things in that space that I don't have expertise on. So I just want to be very open and reflexive for us to understand who I am, where I'm coming from, and if for any reason I'm starting to sound like someone who is an expert in mental health or psychiatry, please, I am not. I am just a researcher, a lay researcher. Um, so can I share my screen? I think I can.
Yeah, give it a try.
Yeah. Okay. Where's my slide? It should be somewhere here. Okay. And I already talked about myself. I am Sylvester, and I will be talking on the intersection of spirituality and religion in relation to healthcare. I want to start by looking at the concept of spirituality and my perception, my discussion will be drawing heavily from an editorial by Voyez published in 2008. In that editorial, the scholar described spirituality as a search for the meaning of life and connectedness to the all-powerful. Some people that believe in the religion, I believe, will call it the Almighty God. And then some that do not hold religious belief might describe that all powerful as the universe or anything that one believes or holds dear in. But spirituality relates to a search for the meaning of life and then trying to connect with the all powerful. Spirituality transcends culture and creed. Spirituality is not the same as religion. Spirituality is institutionalized in religion. Spirituality is universal. Religion might be specific because we've got a set of belief system, and then a group of people that might believe in the same thing might be practicing the same religion. I said before that I'm a Christian, and I understand that there are people across other religions too. But spirituality runs across every religion, across every culture, across every creed. Spirituality has got some elements, as Verges listed. It produces qualities such as love, honesty, patience, tolerance, compassion, a sense of detachment, faith, and hope. Another key thing in my talk is technology. And technology could mean different things to different people. Uh, in the context of my usage, I see technology as advancements, gadgets, tools, processes, innovations that we use in advancing health. So, as I said before, technologies could mean anything, but in the concept of my talk, this is the way I decide to treat technology. And then finally, we are looking at health and trying to maybe um, take it down to mental health, relying on the Australian Institute for Health and Welfare. Mental health is a state of well-being that enables an individual to deal with whatever that life throws at them. Now, the crux of my talk is trying to find the place where all these three converge. Where is the point where spirituality, technology, and health or mental health, where is the point where they converge? And then to once again state that my reflections are built on my lived experience as well as insights from my research with communities, especially communities that have a high level of cultural affiliation and spirituality. Having said that, I said earlier that I really want this conversation to be very organic, and I just like to use this slide, single slide, to bring us along. When I use any of these terms, we know what I am talking about. Now, looking at the description of religion, of spirituality, I beg your pardon, we'll start seeing that spirituality can and does play a very, very strong role in health, including mental health, or should I say, especially mental health. If mental health is a state of well being that empowers someone to deal with life situation, whether such situation is desirable or not, and then spirituality confers a sense of detachment, confers a sense of hope and faith, then we can say that spirituality has got a very, very strong influence in helping people maintain a high level of mental health. That said, there is also a lot of challenges because spirituality could also act as a basis for people to not engage with available care, mental or general, because there are some set of belief system that drive whatever it is that people believe in. I've got three kids, and every time when we are pregnant and we go for antenatal, we are always told of a new technology where we can do um, um, prenatal scan and just to make sure that the baby is fine and nothing is wrong. But we have to give consent. So, well, my spiritual belief is that children come from God and anything that comes from God is perfect. So thank you. I am not interested. So this becomes one of those grounds I said before that spirituality, though conferring a lot of benefits and prospects, also presents some challenges. And then I think I should be in the middle because there are extreme cases where people will not even use antenatal care because of spirituality, because of a belief system around a God that has put a child in the womb, being capable of bringing out the child without human intervention. So these are cases in the extreme. I remember as a child, this is not a very good example, but that was the very first experience of a decaying human I have seen. I had an uncle who was very sick. He belongs to this religious sect that don't believe in technology, whatever it is, including drug. And every effort to get him to the hospital or to get medical care was rebuffed by him and the sect members. And then sadly, after about 2 weeks, he passed. And then the same religious sect got some team of morticians to come and preserve his body. I was just a little boy, but I remember vividly. And my family members said, no, if this person didn't need drugs to stay alive, he also does not need drug to be preserved. And then, according to tradition, he is not to be buried until his children come back from the city. And that was a time that telephone was not common. If it was in my little village, remote village, there was nothing like that. So someone has to be sent to the city to go and tell the kids that your dad has passed, and then the kids had to come back, and that took almost 3 days. And by then, the corpse was already decaying. It was one of the most goring sights I've ever seen. So these are parts of that extreme cases where people rely on spirituality to not engage in available healthcare. And then at the end of the day, it results in um, extreme case, just like the one I've cited. There is a case too recently in the media of a particular parent that had a child who needed health care, and then they went for a religious event, and then the religious leader said, if you are using any medication, you don't have to use it anymore because you are spiritually healed, and then you have to believe it for it to work. And then the parent stopped administering that child's medication, notwithstanding that the child had a life-threatening condition. Sadly, it resulted to the passing of the child. So these are one of the extreme cases where I get concerned, having lived experience of this, reading it in the media, and then hearing my research participants talk to me. I am primarily a qualitative researcher, although I do mixed method research, but I've fallen in love with qualitative research because it opens up views that quantitative results will never give you. I remember in my PhD research, I was talking with someone who doesn't believe in using condoms as a barrier to prevent sexually transmissible infections. And then the belief is not tied to spirituality anyway. It is based on the notion that condoms can cause cervical cancer. And then I was interested to know what they do to protect themselves, knowing that having unprotected sex can lead to infection. And then the person said that before they do anything, they pray. So they pray that they don't contract infection instead of using a system that is proven to be 90-95% effective in preventing infections. And so these are the things I thought of when I saw this year's conference about belief system and health, and I felt, oh, I think this will be an avenue to open conversations on. Um, Maybe there are experts that provide services to communities that deal with some of these issues. Understanding some of these things could help in addressing some of these problems that we are seeing. And then, as a Bible preacher, as I said earlier, I also do think that um, belief systems are not things we impose on people. Spirituality is personal. And then, if an act of faith has worked for us, I think we have to be cautious in impressing same to others, understanding that our levels of spirituality are different. And then also ensure that we give people the flexibility and the opportunity to do what works for them. I know a religious sect that does not believe in blood transfusion, and whenever there is any case that will require blood transfusion, they hope for the worst, and then there is that compensation in quotes that the worst will lead the person to meet the all-powerful face to face. These are issues that we need to start having conversations about, and then trying to see how we can maximize the place of spirituality in enhancing health and well-being, and then trying to see how we can address the challenges that it also brings about in terms of people's willingness to use available health care service. Thank you so much. I will stop talking here for us to have a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sylvester. I wonder before we open it up to everyone, because this is wonderful what you've just laid out for us, a lot of ethics, even trauma and much more. But I wonder if Atsu, from a mental health perspective, if we could hear your views initially in response and also your unique take, and then open it up to everyone because we've got a good half hour if we want.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Becky, and thank you very much, Sylvester, for the insightful presentation and discussion as well. I very much agree with most of the things he said, having come from, having been raised in Ghana as well, where 97% of the population, believes in a supreme being, and then being religious. And that means that translates to being religious. That everybody is being raised in a home where you believe in a supreme being, and that really controls the way you live and then what you believe as well. And like Sylvester rightly mentioned, people rely on spirituality to not engage in healthcare seeking practices as well, in as much as there are some protective and some negative aspects of it. I've largely come to see the quite the negative aspects of it as well. um, so I'm seeing this through the lens of my medical practice back in Ghana, having practiced in some field of mental health care in Ghana, and also being involved in a telemedicine service that seeks to provide affordable and accessible care for Ghanaians, and also being involved in advocacy efforts towards the repeal of Ghana's law that criminalize suicidal activities. So many people in Ghana, many people in Ghana, and at the extent to Sub-Saharan Africa as well, have a spiritual worldview, especially as regards mental health, because many mental health conditions may manifest in quite unusual ways, right? So people tend to attribute mental health conditions to having a spiritual cause. Now, this is highly rooted in a lot of biblical beliefs. So I'm speaking from the Christian point of view. Lots of biblical beliefs where where we believe in the power of words. So people believe that once you're having a very unusual manifestation or a very unusual presentation, it's highly likely to be a spiritual cause. And this also influences how people talk about mental health, right? So in a certain way, people believe that words have power. It even translates to the fact that when people have a mental health condition, even the very educated ones, they are quite adamant about admitting this or mentioning the fact that I'm living with depression, I'm living with anxiety, because they believe that they saying that alone would more or less officially stamp that they have the condition. So people may be able to identify that they have that, or are living with that, or are experiencing that, but will not be able to voice it out. And this also translates to how they will seek help. So during my mental health service, we run a helpline, and then you meet a lot of people with mental health conditions, and surprisingly, most of them are able to identify that they may be living with depression, anxiety, but they believe that the mere mention of that alone actually officially stamps the fact that they have it. And this translates into how those seek care as well. So they don't want to go into a mental health facility. They would rather prefer using a digital health service, but would never mention the fact that, you know, I agree or I've come to accept I'm living with depression. This is so much of a problem as well. So the way people perceive, mental health conditions highly affects the way they even seek care as well, and especially digital health care as well. There's another aspect as well, and when I was back in Ghana, one of my professors did an insightful study where we realized that many people in Ghana actually seek spiritual care as their first port of call when they develop a mental health condition, because they identify them as having a spiritual basis. So instead of seeking professional mental health service, you have people, even the very educated people, going straight away to a spiritual camp. Now, we did realize that this was rooted in the spiritual belief that they had, and we tried as much as possible to more or less encourage them to seek professional mental health care as well. But that was very difficult because it was a deeply entrenched belief. So we worked with some faith-based healers. So we had to partner. So my department, the Department of Psychiatry, and the hospital in which I worked had to partner with some of the spiritual camps, and said that, and agreed to a partnership with the spiritual healers, saying that we do understand that many people patronize the services because of their beliefs. We also want to work alongside you to institute some form of medical care as well. So in this case, there was a collaboration where the spiritual healers were allowed to do their exorcism, to allow to engage in their prayers. However, we partner with them to ensure that on the side, we're also providing some psychotherapy and some psychotherapeutic medication as well. And we realized that some of the spiritual healers were engaging in some practices which violated some human rights. So it was bordering more or less on human rights abuse. So they developed an app which showed their faith healers how to manage people with mental health disorders and how to communicate with them as well. And this came up pretty much fruitful. The outcomes were significantly improved. Now there's a last bit where the whole aspect of spirituality actually also translated into the mental health laws in Ghana as well. When and in 2017 there was a spate of suicides in the country, and that's when people actually realized that we had a very archaic law that criminalized attempted suicides. So previously in Ghana, if somebody was found culpable of attempting suicide, the person could be taken to the court and be jailed as a result of that. And this was a law that existed for a very long time. We found that this law, in as much as was archaic, this law was inherited from the British colonial rule. However, the British had moved away from that law so many years ago after understanding the biological basis of suicides. But Ghana has still preserved that particular law. And then we came to realize that the perpetration of the law was as a result of our deep-rooted spiritual beliefs about mental health. So many people still believe that mental health, had a spiritual cause or something like that. So they felt that taking away the law or having that law in place will more or less serve as a deterrent, for people, a deterrent against people taking their whole lives. Because back into the biblical roots, it's believed that one's life doesn't belong to the person, right? So once again, it was belief. So lawmakers believed that people didn't have the right to take on their lives because their lives belong to God as well. So that's how come this law perpetrates. So we realize that the beliefs actually have very entrenched effects, effects that cuts across healthcare seeking behavior and our laws as well. And this has been particularly worrying. But then there have been positive trends in the matter. Many people are becoming more educated and more enlightened about the biological cause of mental health conditions. So more people are now seeking help. More people are now accepting of the fact that they have mental health conditions, which actually have which they can actually find some solutions for within the hospital. So things are getting much better now. And then on the very last point, I recently conducted a systematic review on how digital health technology can improve accessibility to mental health in sub-Saharan Africa. And a chunk of our findings was on the acceptability factor, seeing how digital health could be acceptable. Now we came to some of the findings. They were we had some stark findings in the systematic review, and one was that in as much as many digital health technology and mental health were created or were curated to help support people living with mental health conditions, it was very difficult for them to accept it because they felt that once again taking accepting help for the mental health condition, whether it came in a digital health form or whether it came in a physical form, or I mean in a physical infrastructure form, was actually a certification of the fact that they were losing their minds or they were going mad, as many people would have it. Pardon my French. However, for many digital mental health applications or interventions which adopted a participatory approach, just realized that many people were actually accepting of them. So the key finding in the systematic review was that in trying to include or in trying to help a community in sub-Saharan Africa adopt a digital mental health technology, you will have to adopt a participatory approach. And the participatory approach first has to do with educating the people about mental health, trying to desensitize them about their spiritual or more or less trying to make them understand that in as much as they believe that there's a spiritual basis to it, there's also a biological basis to it as well to get them to accept the digital mental health intervention. And this is one thing that we employ in our telemedicine service. We screen people and then we try to signpost them for help. But as soon as they hear that you're more or less signposting them to a psychiatric facility, they are very adamant to receive help. They wouldn't want to do it again. Just because you've mentioned the word psychiatry, there's a whole spiritual connotation to it. So what we did, the little step or action we took in our call center script was that we always draw a parallel between mental health conditions and malaria. Malaria is very common in Africa. So we do mention the fact that, okay, having a mental health condition is just similar to having malaria. You have malaria, you go to the hospital with fever, the doctor gives you a medication, and then you become better. In the same way, you can also have a mental health condition, go and see a doctor, and then the doctor will prescribe some medication or some therapy, which can make you feel better. So we had to introduce that particular line in our screening scripts just because of the highly entrenched spiritual connotations that exist with mental health and SSC. So, in summary, spirituality influences the way we see things, the way we perceive things as well, and the way many people, especially in Africa, actually seek mental health care as well. And spirituality is part and parcel of the culture of the people. So, in trying to introduce any digital mental health intervention in sub-Saharan Africa, there's a need to adopt, a participatory approach to help them understand, to help them dispel certain myths they have, and to help them accept the digital mental health intervention that one wishes to propose. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Atsu. That was really well presented. And also, Sylvester, going back to your presentation, I want to be very passive in my moderation. So if you can raise your hand, that's ideal. And we can also kickstart some stuff I've seen in the chat. I was very much locked into your words, so I'm very bad with following the chat, but I did skim and see a couple things there. But if you can pop your hands up and I think Kevin, if you feel comfortable and you wanted to discuss that, there was a couple kind of thumbs up on that
Yeah, I
question.
mean, I think it's I suppose first of all, where am I coming from on this? I'm not a mental health professional. I'm a technology guy, and I've actually been doing it long enough probably longer than some of you guys are alive. So I have seen technological revolutions coming for the last 45 years, and I'm still waiting. Um, and I think that's part of the, shall we say, healthy skepticism around technology. Um, we've been promised a paperless office for 45 years. It hasn't happened yet. Printers are still big business. Um, so I think there's, there's a sort of a system one reaction, and I suppose Kahneman's my go-to guy because I like the way he looks at human behavior and sort of says, well, don't care about the models, what actually happens. And when you do that, I think religious systems, scientific systems, cultural systems are frameworks for us to meet the world, right? Because if we didn't have those shortcuts and frameworks, the cognitive overload it would just, I think, we wouldn't be able to sort of function properly. But the problem is we know that system one thinking isn't a rational system. It's an evolutionary system that's evolved basically to stop us being lunch on the savannah and get to eat lunch on the savannah. Um, so, at a species level, it's highly functional. At an individual level, though, I think it's more difficult. Um, and if you buy the system two, thinking the rational sort of side of our brain, the expensive bit to fire up, the slow, expensive bit to fire up, I wonder whether or not when we look at mental health problems, what we're looking at is a conflict between that irrational but successful evolutionary way of meeting the world and the rational way of meeting the world that can't reconcile those two systems. And rather than, and technology is really guilty of this, rather than doing things to people, I think technology has been very guilty of doing things to people. But I might also argue that mental health treatment is also guilty of the same thing. Now, not for malicious reasons. I think that's important to stress. I think we're doing the best we can with the information we've got. But if you would ask me to characterize it, I would say mental health treatments where physiological treatment was 110 years ago. You'd walk into a doctor and you didn't know what you were going to get. You might be successful, you might not. I think mental health, the model, we diagnose people, but we don't then match that diagnosis to any modality they get treated. We just treat them with whatever's available. Now, it's a resource issue, and I accept it's a very, very big problem, but it's a problem that's grown apace. And we haven't really fixed that. We've got lots of new things, but everything seems to collapse back to Kuiper's, number needed to treat being 7. There you go. There's the holy hand grenade.
Thank you, Kevin. I'll stay out of this. People, please, yeah, feel free to just speak up, put your hand up, or we can go through the chat.
Well, I'll speak up to one question that I had in the chat, and I directed it to Sylvester. And then Ed had chimed in on it also, and that is this. So would you say that the aspects of belief that you talked about, chiefly around resistance to the use of technology, whether that is electronic, digital technology, or whether that is the technology of therapy, of modern therapy, I guess I would say, psychotherapy, do you see these barriers as something that should be overcome or something that should just be accepted and tolerated because that's where a person happens to be within their cultural context? And who are we, whatever our intentions are as outsiders, to try to impose our view of this on others? What's your take on that?
Thank you. A, a very, very challenging question and calls for deep reflection. My take is that we need to give platforms for people to question what they think or feel is the norm, reflect on these norms, and then understands that there is also another side to whatever it is they hold on to. Uh, we can't, I don't think we should impose things on people, but I also do think that we also owe humanity a responsibility. Um, eh, for instance, in the issue of parenting, where a parent decides to withdraw medication for a child that's got a life-threatening condition, that is the parent's belief. That is not that child's belief. And then the parent is presumed to make decisions in the best interest of that child. So it becomes a very, very, as I said before, the question is a very, very, it's not a straight-jacketed question of here or there, but I do think that we mustn't impose, but we owe humanity that responsibility of giving people opportunities to challenge what they believe. There was a time infanticide was a practice in some part of Nigeria. When you have multiple births, it is believed to be a taboo for a human to have a child at the same have multiple births, like twins or triplets or quadruplets. That practice was stopped by Mary Slessor. She didn't stop it by force or violence or imposing. It was done by persuasion, by giving people opportunity to reflect, by taking some of those kids that would have been killed, and then raising those kids for the community to see that the fear of the gods of the land coming to strike you for keeping multiple births is not real. And then people start questioning, we keep farm animals, we want our goats to give birth to 4 or 5. Then why should we kill humans when they do? So that is where I think we should start having conversation, not to impose on people, but to give them opportunity to ask questions. It's like the very, very good example that Dr. Atu mentioned of a law in Ghana that was copied from the British law that has been long expunged but still practiced in Ghana. So these are the things we want to talk about. Can we have templates, opportunities, platforms to have this kind of conversations where people start thinking, this thing I believe, where is it coming from? I teach social justice and diversity, and then I do pre-teaching survey, and then after teaching, I do post-teaching survey, and then I see the power of giving people platforms. I'm a teacher. I don't indoctrinate. I educate, and I believe in providing opportunities for people to think. And wherever your thinking takes you to, so be it. Thank you so much. Don't let me stretch this longer.
Amazing. Okay, and we've got Edmund and then Joel.
Thank you very much. This is actually very interesting. And let me just act like a devil's advocate. So you mentioned that the concept of spirituality is actually a search. I mean, that's like the dominant account of spirituality, which is a search for meaning. And you also said that it is transcendental or it's transcendent. And at least coming from a Kantian perspective, it's transcendental. But then I want to ask, one, would is spirituality, the concept of spirituality, not subjectively oriented in a sense that if it is transcendental, then there's this objective value about spirituality. And that objective value is one that searches for meaning. And that is because for some reason, meaning in life is somewhat objective or transcendental. Um, but I'd like to think that, especially when it comes to meaning in life, there's a lot of subjectivity that has to do with that. But that is, by the way, you also said something like we owe humanity a responsibility. So who defines the responsibility that we owe to humanity? Who has the epistemic authority to define that? And then who also defines what is the best interest of humanity? Um, yeah, maybe you could just clarify those for me.
Thank you so much. First, spirituality transcends culture and creed. Spirituality is institutionalized in religion, and then some of these belief systems could be very subjective, but what runs across all is spirituality. Someone can tell you that they don't believe in God, but they believe in the universe. And then there is this book I found very early, helped me a lot, Rhonda Byrne, The Secret. Um, uh, it's got a video to The Secret Law of Attraction. Now, if as a Bible preacher, if you tell someone anything about faith and the person says they don't believe in faith in God, give them Rhonda Byrne, and everything that the person that believes in faith gets as a result, the theory, the law of secret law of attraction gets you exactly the same. So the difference then becomes universe, God, or whatever source. So I don't know if I clarified that. And then coming back to the epistemic question, as a cultural researcher, I strongly believe that um, we have natural laws where everything should start from. And then that natural law confers on parents, for instance, to take responsibility of caring for their children. And when that responsibility is not kept, I always say that my humanity is attached to the humanity of others. So when I think of the unfortunate plane crash in Bangladesh yesterday, it gives me sleepless nights. When I think of the very, very unfortunate things going on in different parts of the world, including my country, Nigeria, where people sleep and then they don't wake up because some militias come and burn them in their sleep. It gives me sleepless nights. So, should we create a society where people become laws to themselves and do what they deem fit and say, no one can impose thoughts, ideas, or thinking on me? I think that takes us back to the era of barbarism. And I think human advancement has gone way beyond that. I'm sorry if I did not answer your question correctly. I'm trying to answer it based on the way I understand. There are natural laws that should be the starting point for all these. And then, while people are free to keep their belief and their cultural thinking, we must also understand that there should be opportunities for reflections. There should be opportunities for questioning what we believe, questioning those laws and norms. Where do they come from? Are they in line with natural justice? Are they in line with natural laws? So once again, I'm sorry if that doesn't answer your question clearly, but to the best of my understanding, I think that's just what I could think of now.
I'd love to connect you both as well, so I can follow up with that and keep going with that conversation. I'm very aware we have 2 and a bit minutes. I saw hands go up. It was Joel, Atsu, Kevin, but then hands went down. So final thought, whoever, Kevin's hand is still up, but I'm also aware of Atsu if you have like a final thought to wrap up the session. But yeah,
Becky,
just
can I just quickly, because
please.
I put it down so there are not so many hands up, and I just wanted, as a trauma therapist, I just want to introduce something we have not talked about, which is really important here, and that's trauma and mental health and belief systems. So we don't have time for that, but I just wanted to say that it's part of the equation and has to do with that discussion about rational thinking. It doesn't work. There's huge discussion on rational thinking, but if there's trauma involved, and there is usually in mental health or a lot, that doesn't work. Anyway, so just really quick.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that will carry through the remaining sessions of the day. We can try and explore that more. So yes, Kevin, if you can be very brief, and Atsu, if you still want to jump in.
Okay, natural laws or moral systems inevitably are the tyranny of the majority. I would push back on the idea of natural laws.
Okay, and Atsu, do you still have a final?
Yeah, I also wanted to talk about the culture bit, the whole culture bit, and about I think Craig's question and a relation as to whether, we should accept the digital health, or, I mean, whether what's being imposed on the people or not. And I am thinking that in the field of mental health, a lot of things have been paternalistic, right? People have their cultures, and then cultures, in as much as are beautiful, can have negative practices as well. But largely in the field of mental health, most mental health interventions have been quite paternalistic, and I come to realize that in the regions where there's a poor mental health seeking behavior because of the cultural practices, because of spirituality, many of the mental health interventions have been paternalistic. They've never involved the people. So the people have hardly seen the need to move away from their deeply entrenched spiritual beliefs and practices, which are mitigating against their health, to adopting, more scientific processes and beliefs. And this comes in various forms as well. When drug trials are being done to a very large extent, many people within, regions which have poor health seeking behaviors are not largely represented. Many people are not considered, and a lot of things seem paternalistic. So I believe that people can change their culture. Culture is evolving, culture is dynamic as well. So if you involve the people in what we are doing, if you adopt a participatory approach, you are likely able to get their buy-in as well. So in as much as culture is beautiful, culture can have negative aspects we can mitigate against people's health as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Atsu. And Big Ben has just chimed, so I have to stop. But I hope to see you at future sessions. So thank you, everyone, especially to Sylvester and